All right, students, we're back for our week 2 of this Psychology of Adult Development course. Again, I'm Dr. Bond, okay? I'm your instructor. Let's think about what's going on this week. Now, what you're going to do, I hope you have the book. I hope you purchased that book and you have it ready because we're diving right in. To chapter 1. Okay, so what I want you to do is probably after you watch this lecture and write down the important concepts that I talk about in this lecture, then you'll go to chapter 1 and read it, and then you'll see some of the concepts that I talk about in this lecture, and you probably want to concentrate on those, for the quiz that will be due at the end of this week. Okay. All right. With that in mind, I'm going to start. With developmental psychology, most people who did research on development, psychological and physical, in the lifespan, only studied children, and in some cases adolescents, and didn't really look at adults, okay? And the reason why that was is because, most developmental researchers thought that development only occurred during childhood and adolescence, and not much happened after that in terms of, physical and psychological development. Because, why? People didn't live that long, okay? Back in 1900, the life expectancy of people around the world, in the Americas mainly, was only about 41 years old. Okay, so those were relatively short lives. Okay, although you can look at life expectancy with a grain of salt because it takes into account, the deaths of infants. Okay, and infant deaths used to be really high in our earlier history. Okay, and so you take all of the people who were born and all of the people who died, and you can look at how life expectancy has been calculated. So there were actually old people, older adults who lived during the 1900s. But, looking at the lifespan back then, sort of mainly their reality was that people just only developed during childhood and adolescence. Okay? So that was their perspective. Now, what we have in psychology today is kind of a 50-year record of research in adults, young adults, middle adults, and older adults, to kind of base our understanding of those folks on. Okay, so now in current times, we live much longer. Okay, about 77 years of age in the Americas, according to this link. And you can look at this link and see, kind of a trend from the 1700s to now in terms of life expectancy. It's increased tremendously for various reasons. Okay, we don't have as many infant deaths now, and we have much better health systems and nutrition in terms of food that we eat. Okay. Now, you probably read, at least during this year or last year, that life expectancy is kind of taking a dip. Okay. It's not as high as it was in the past 5 years. Because why? Because of the pandemic. Okay. We've lost a lot of people through death due to COVID-19, okay? And so this is something that we need to think about when we think about the life expectancy of people. But anyway, from a researcher's point of view, now we know that development occurs all the way from conception through death. Okay, and development involves looking at both the psychological and physical changes that occur across the lifespan in various periods, right? Now, in this course, as you know, we're just looking at the adulthood period. We're not focusing on childhood or adolescence in this course. Okay, and so we'll get into the specifics of change and stability from emerging adulthood through death. Okay, and I'm going to talk about emerging adulthood just a little bit on this slide. Okay, and the next slide. Now note that in Chapter 1 and in most of your textbook, the book focuses on older adults. Okay, but the way I teach this course, we're going to be looking not only at older adults and their personality changes and their social systems and their physical structure, right? And increases and decreases in various psychological areas. But we're also going to go back and forth from that anchor to look at emerging adults, young adults, middle adults, and then back to older adulthood, okay? And so I really like this book because it concentrates on all of kind of the factors that influence the psychology of adulthood, okay? So you'll notice that in each lecture that I produce after this week, we're going to be looking at older adulthood first, but also journeying through the various age groups of adulthood, okay, to talk about how, say, cognition is affected or memory is affected in those various stages, okay? So, we need to think about, when is a person an adult, okay? Have you asked yourself the question, am I an adult? Okay. We probably all asked that question at one point in time. Some of you are maybe struggling with it now. Am I an adult or am I still an adolescent? Okay. Now, G. Stanley Hall, who was one of the founders of psychology, he was, I think, the first president of the American Psychological Association, studied adolescence and said that adolescents went through a period of storm and stress. Okay, so they're very emotional and they reacted to lots of things, and that's the way that he characterized adolescence. But then he said, after about the age of 18, people kind of calm down. Okay, and they move into the adulthood period. Okay. But, G. Stanley Hall was a researcher way back in the early 1900s, and so he didn't look at adulthood in terms of starting maybe later than age 18, okay? Now, current researchers indicate that brain development continues, through the age of 21 to 25, okay? There's kind of a blooming and pruning going on in the brain in terms of all the connections that we're making as we learn new things and as we produce new habits, and the brain continues to change up until the age of, say, 21 to 25. So you can say that maybe people move into adulthood or emerge into adulthood sort of later than past researchers have kind of talked about. Okay. Now, you can read Chapter 1, and it doesn't say too much about when you are an adult, but we do want to look at a couple of sources in this lecture And you'll pause the lecture and you'll kind of watch this video and access the link on the next slide to kind of get an idea of what it means to emerge into adulthood. Okay, so down at the bottom of this particular slide, you want to click on this YouTube link and watch this TED Talk. And this is Jeffrey Arnett, and he's a major researcher who has been looking at the emerging adulthood period and asking when people view themselves as being an adult. Okay, so pause the video and watch that. All right, you should be back by now after watching that video, and let's talk a little bit about research that's a little more current. This one's 16 years old, but I'm going to talk about this and look at work by these people named Nelson and Berry in 2005. And they actually looked at over 200 college students who were still in college, and they gave them lots of items that they would rate, telling whether they felt that they were an adult or not. You see this little link with all those words in it? Why don't you copy and paste that into your browser and search it, and then read the abstract, and also look at Table 2 in their paper to see what kinds of items these people rated to determine whether they were adults or not. Okay? So take a little time to do that. You can pause the video for this process. All right, now after coming back, can you tie the information that you just read about in this research by Nelson and Berry to ideas in Chapter 1, the part that says developmental influences and issues in Chapter 1, okay? And this part of the book talks about transitions, okay? Now, if you think about it, we go through so many transitions in life. We graduate from high school. We graduate from college. We get a job. We maybe get married. We maybe have children, right? We maybe later get divorced, okay? These are all transitions that occur throughout our life, okay? And how do those transitions play a role in the way we think about ourselves in terms of becoming an adult or not, okay? So think about this as you go through this process. All right, this was a short lecture, relatively short, about 15 minutes. After reading this lecture, I want you to access the video and reading links that were in this PowerPoint, and then I want you to thoroughly read Chapter 1 and take really good notes, okay? And your item to do for this week is to take Quiz 1, okay? And that will be due on Sunday night by 11:59 p.m. So don't forget to get that done for week 2. We're kind of starting slow in this course, I know, and it's not too much work, and I hope you're kind of easing into, the process of getting back in college during this semester and getting your feet wet, right? Okay, so make sure that you get Quiz 1 due by Sunday. All right, thanks a lot. I'll see you in week 3. Bye-bye.